Are you ready for the next part of Papa Panov's special day? Can you remember yesterday how we read about Papa Panov getting his old brown book off the shelf and reading about Jesus? And can you remember he fell asleep and then he heard a voice and he believed it was Jesus. And Jesus said, "Look out into the street from dawn to dusk tomorrow, and I will come." Let's find out what happens next. Oh, there he is. Papa Panov is looking out of his window. Oh, and there's the sun coming up. So that's right, we left Papa Panov and he was waiting, wasn't he? At last there was someone. A figure came into view at the far end of the winding road. Papa Panov pressed his face to the frosty glass. He was very excited. Perhaps this was Jesus coming to see him. Then he stepped back, disappointed. The figure was coming closer, trudging slowly up the street, stopping every now and then. Papa Panov knew who it was, the old road sweeper who came each week with his barrow and broom. Papa Panov felt cross. He had better things to do than watch out for an old road sweeper. He was waiting for God, for the King, Jesus. He turned away from the window impatiently and waited till he thought the old fellow had passed by. But when he turned back, the road sweeper was there on the other side of the road, opposite Papa Panov's shop. He had set down his barrow and was rubbing his hands together and stamping his feet. Papa Panov felt sorry. The poor road sweeper did look very cold. And imagine having to work on Christmas Day. So he went and tapped on the window, but the old fellow didn't hear. So he went and opened the door of the little shop. Oh, let me read those two sentences again. Papa Panov tapped on the window, but the old fellow did not hear. So he went and opened the door of the little shop. What do you think Papa Panov's going to do next? I wonder. "Hey!" he called from the doorway. "Hey, old chap!" The road sweeper looked round anxiously. People were often very rude to him because of his job. But Papa Panov was smiling. "How about a cup of coffee?" he called. "You look frozen to the bone." The road sweeper left his barrow at once. "Don't mind if I do," he said, shuffling into the tiny shop. "It's very kind of you, very kind." Papa Panov poured out a mug of coffee from the jug on the stove. "It's the least I can do," he said over his shoulder. "After all, it is Christmas." The old fellow sniffed. "Well, this is all the Christmas I'll get." As he warmed himself at the stove, thin drifts of steam rose from his damp clothes, making a sour smell in the room. Papa Panov returned to his place at the window and gazed up and down the street. "You expecting visitors?" asked the old road sweeper gruffly. "Not in the way, am I?" Papa Panov shook his head. Well, have you heard of Jesus?" he asked. "The Son of God?" asked the old man. "He's coming today," replied Papa Panov. The old man looked at him in astonishment. So Papa Panov told him the whole story. So that's why I'm watching out for him, he finished at last. The road sweeper set down his mug, shook his head gloomily, and made for the door. Well, the best of luck, he said, and thanks for the coffee. For the first time, the road sweeper smiled. Then he hurried off into the street, collecting his barrow as he went. Papa Panov stood in the open doorway and watched the road sweeper disappear. He looked up and down the street. The winter sun was shining brightly, and its rays even gave off a little warmth, which was melting the frost on the window and the slippery ice on the cobblestones. People were beginning to stir. A few drunks staggered home after the parties of the night before. Families in smart clothes hurried on their way to visit relatives. They nodded and smiled at Papa Panov as he stood on the threshold of his shop. "Merry Christmas, Papa Panov," they called, and the old shoemaker nodded and smiled back. But he did not stop them. He knew them all by name. He was waiting for someone else. We know who he's waiting for, don't we?